who are committed to spreading Korean traditional culture. Feel the pulse of Korean culture on The Culture Wave. A mini documentary for those who aren't sure what they like yet. Taste Log. See how personal taste can shape our approach to spaces, objects, and hobbies. Discover your own interests among myriad stories of different people's tastes. A stimulating record to enrich your daily life. Taste Log. Culture Crunched, delivered in the voice of our host, Joel.
So in English, it means
From analyzing K-pop lyrics to listening to live performances by musicians from home and abroad, as well as meeting people from all walks of life. We explore a different theme every day, expanding your view of culture and the world beyond in one bite. Culture Crunch. Simply K-pop, gateway to Korea. Delivering the full energy of a concert, not only to the studio audience, but also to the fans around the world. Stunning choreography, powerful singing, and rookie energy. Don't miss these dynamic scenes. After the performance, experience a heartfelt moment of connection in the fan Q&A session.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
Torrential rains that have pounded the entire nation since Wednesday have left at least 4 people dead and 2 others missing, as the concerns over further damage continue to grow. President Lee Jae-myung ordered related officials to deploy every necessary resource to prevent accidents and minimize the damage, as heavy downpours are expected to persist through the weekend. On Friday, the National Assembly approved President Lee Jae-myung's initial cabinet picks for 3 key posts: Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and Economy Minister. Meanwhile, the final day of confirmation hearings for the Health and Interior Minister nominees was marked by sharp clashes between rival parties over the nominees' qualifications and surrounding allegations. The South Korean economy continues to face downward pressure due to slowing exports and worsening external conditions due to U.S. tariffs, the Finance Ministry assesses in its latest assessment. But there are also signs of improvement, such as improving consumer sentiment. Since Wednesday, South Korea has been facing the strongest recorded torrential rain in around 200 years. Heavy rain advisories have been lifted in some northern areas, but the southern parts of the country remain on high alert. Our Park Jun-han starts us off.
Torrential rain across South Korea this week has so far caused the deaths of 4 people, with 2 still listed as missing as of this morning. During the period, over 5,600 people have been evacuated from their places of residence. The sudden torrential rain caused widespread flooding in many areas, including residential and commercial districts, as well as agricultural regions. Around 13,000 hectares of farmland have been affected by flooding, equivalent to 18,000 soccer fields. As of Friday, there were around 900 damage reports in Gwangju, a city that has been one of the most severely hit by the downpours. The government raised its severe weather alert level to Stage 3 on Thursday, its highest response level. Large parts of South Korea have experienced serious flooding that has interfered with response services as well as daily activities. Roads, buildings, and farmland have been inundated, railroads blocked, and rivers and streams have overflowed their banks. Many schools were forced to cancel classes or adjust operating hours. The Korea Meteorological Administration lifted heavy rain warnings and advisories for Seoul, northern Gyeonggi-do, and Gangwon-do provinces as of 4 p.m. Friday. But despite this, southern regions of the country remain vulnerable, having already suffered significant damage and still facing the risk of further flooding. The heavy rainfall will continue until this weekend, especially in Chungcheongnam-do province and southern regions.
Heavy rain will continue through tomorrow, with up to 50 millimeters per hour expected tonight and tomorrow morning. Some areas could see up to 200 millimeters, with southern regions possibly experiencing up to 300 millimeters.
The government said it will continue to closely monitor weather conditions and take appropriate action where necessary. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
And to address the growing threats from heavy rains, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung canceled a scheduled town hall and instead convened an emergency response meeting. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yu-jin has the details.
Disasters may be inevitable, but their damage, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung says, can be reduced with thorough preparation. That was the key message from the president on Friday as he convened an emergency meeting in response to the heavy rains.
국가의 제1의 책무는 국민의 생명과 안전을 지키는 일입니다. 좀 과하다 싶을 정도로 피해 예방과 사고 예방을 위해서 필요한 자원들을 충분히 배치해야 되겠습니다.
With downpours battering the country for days and already claiming several lives, President Lee postponed a scheduled town hall in the southeastern city of Busan and instead visited the National Disaster and Safety Status Control Center in Seoul. Emphasizing preemptive action, he instructed the Korea Meteorological Administration to issue timely alerts tailored to each region.
취약 지역인 또 취약 국민들인 반지하 또는 독거 주민들 그리고 범람이나 산사태 또 붕괴 함몰 우려가 있는 지역들에 대해서 철저하게 사전 대비를 해야 되겠습니다.
The president also urged local governments to stay in full emergency mode and carry out post-disaster support and recovery efforts without delay. He then received updates on damage assessments and response measures from the Ministry of the Interior and Safety and local authorities.
President Lee spoke to the mayor of Ulsan in detail about why the road wasn't fully closed off, despite prior warnings from residents before the retaining wall collapsed.
The collapse on Wednesday killed a man trapped in his vehicle. 송유진, Arirang News.
Now in Parliament, the National Assembly today approved confirmation hearing reports for top economic and foreign policy cabinet positions. Our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
South Korea's National Assembly has approved confirmation hearing reports for 3 high-profile ministerial nominees, including the government's top economic and foreign policy positions. On Friday, lawmakers adopted reports for Koo Yoon-chol, chosen to serve as Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Economy and Finance, Cho Hyun, nominated for Foreign Minister, and Kim Jong-kwan, the pick for Trade Minister. The opposition People Power Party, which had initially vowed to withhold approval for the cabinet's nominees, ultimately agreed to move forward with those seen as essential to national policy.
With less than 2 weeks left before the U.S. begins imposing reciprocal tariffs, this is an urgent situation. We'll do our part to make sure the confirmation reports for the finance, foreign, and trade ministers are adopted quickly so they can get to work on the tariff negotiations right away.
The new administration needs to complete its cabinet as soon as possible and focus fully on running the country. That's the only way we can not only help people recover from economic hardships, but also respond swiftly and effectively to disasters like the recent heavy rains.
But not all nominees have been given the green light. Confirmation hearings continued on Friday for the administration's final batch of nominees for the week. Among them were Chung Eun-kyung, the nominee for Minister of Health and Welfare, and Yoon Ho-jung, up for Interior and Safety Minister. Chung, the former head of the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, acknowledged challenges such as South Korea's aging population and outlined plans to push forward expanding healthcare benefits for children and the elderly.
The ministry must double down on its core mission, strengthening the social security system and improving public health to ensure a basic standard of living for all citizens.
Yoon, a 5-term sitting lawmaker, pledged to prioritize AI innovation and balance national development led by districts outside the capital region. Meanwhile, 2 more nominees for Land Minister and Culture Minister are still awaiting their confirmation hearings. The PPP also continues to hold firm against 2 other controversial picks, Lee Jin-suk for Education Minister and Kang Son-woo for Gender Equality Minister, citing allegations of academic misconduct and abuse of authority, respectively. As President Lee looks to finalize his first cabinet, the outcome of these final hearings and the political tensions around them could help shape the early direction of his administration. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea, the U.S. and Japan have reaffirmed the need for a strong deterrence against North Korea. Vice Foreign Ministers Park Yoon-ju, Christopher Landau, and Takehiro Funakoshi held talks in Tokyo on Friday, marking 10 years since the deputy-level trilateral began. The 3 officials pledged to keep up coordinated pressure on Pyongyang while backing diplomatic efforts to reopen talks. They also pushed for deeper cooperation in economic and tech resilience, from AI to supply chains and critical minerals, as core initiatives to safeguard regional stability. The vice ministers lauded the launch of a new trilateral secretariat between their governments as a key measure to expand their 3-way cooperation. Concerns over downward pressure on the South Korean economy continue to linger, but the country's financial authorities note there are positive signs, such as improving consumer sentiment. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young explains.
South Korea's economy continues to face downward pressure due to a delayed recovery in domestic demand and ongoing trade risks, but some positive signs, such as improving consumer sentiment, are emerging. That's according to the latest Economic Green Book, a monthly economic assessment report released by the Finance Ministry on Friday. This also marks the 7th consecutive month that the government stated that the economy faces downside pressure. However, the ministry slightly toned down its assessment by omitting the term increasing in reference to downside risks.
Recent downward pressure on the Korean economy is largely due to the slow recovery of domestic demand, particularly in consumption and construction investment, coupled with persistent employment difficulties in vulnerable sectors and worsening external conditions stemming from U.S. tariff impositions. However, we're also starting to see some positive signs, like an improvement in consumer sentiment.
He added that while downward factors previously dominated, both upward and downward factors are now coexisting.
It seems the recent significant rise in stock prices and expectations for supplementary budget projects are positively influencing consumer sentiment. There's potential for these factors to continue to positively affect consumption in the future.
Despite these positive signals, trade risks in exports remain a significant concern as the August 1st deadline for tariff negotiations approaches. The ministry analyzed that exports in June rose by 4.3% compared to the same month last year, largely attributed to improved semiconductor market conditions and pull-forward demand before the end of the pause on U.S. reciprocal tariffs. To boost economic and livelihood recovery, the ministry has pledged to swiftly execute a supplementary budget worth 31.8 trillion won, or around $23 billion. It also reaffirmed its efforts to ensure that the livelihood recovery consumption coupons, scheduled for distribution from July 21st, become a catalyst for revitalizing domestic demand, including consumption and local economies. To address trade risks, the government said it is committed to providing comprehensive support for Korean companies affected by U.S. tariff impositions. 문지영, Arirang News.
Netflix's animated hit K-pop Demon Hunters is still making waves. And secret behind its success, a unique fusion of Korean tradition and pop culture. An Sung-jin tells us more.
Bands. A demon boy band?
K-pop, an animation combining to create a global sensation. The Netflix movie K-pop Demon Hunters, which tells the story of a K-pop girl group and their secret identities as demon hunters, topped charts in 41 countries within the first week of its release on June 20. Its original soundtrack album also dominated global music charts, ranking second on the Billboard 200 and 8 individual tracks topping a variety of other charts. But it's not only the visuals and music. The movie is made even more special by incorporating Korean tradition and culture, even embedding aspects of shamanism.
Netflix has a lot of reach all over the world, so whoever did not know about the Korean culture before was introduced in some way or another.
Also, just like the K-pop part, you know, it was a good way to combine something that's so mainstream these days and Korean culture. I think it was also a good way to educate people about Korean culture.
And this explosive craze for the animated film has resulted in a sales boost for products, which bear a resemblance to characters and items that appear on screen. In fact, at the gift store at the National Museum of Korea, items including tiger and magpie badges and a pen featuring a kat, or traditional Korean hat, saw a huge uptick in sales.
This seems to be an opportunity to share Korean traditional culture with global consumers through content. Hallyu at the moment is trending with a lot of interest, so we hope to further work on disseminating our culture through these products.
The presence of such traditional icons play a true role in disseminating Korean culture beyond K-pop.
Not only is it very well made, but it's the Korean elements that become interesting and refreshing for Western viewers. With their popularity, these films serve as culture ambassadors, often more effective than government campaigns.
By blending Korean heritage with intriguing storytelling and catchy rhythms, K-pop Demon Hunters has turned into a trendsetter for global fans, fueling further interest in Korea's cultural icons. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Now in K-pop news, a fresh new boy band debuted today, but they're truly one of a kind, with all of its members coming from outside of South Korea, including North Korea. Our Park Gon-woo has their story.
Alone, they're just individuals with different verses, but together, they create a story, a song, and a universe. That's how you could describe this brand new 5-piece K-pop group, Universe, which has 2 members who are North Korean defectors. It's extremely rare to see North Korean-born idol stars debut on the K-pop scene, which makes you wonder how they first got into K-pop.
I came across FX's La Cha music video when I was young and heard K-pop songs through USBs passed around secretly.
Coming to South Korea at a young age was already a dangerous journey, but their struggle didn't end there.
My beloved family were still in the north, and while coming here allowed me to finally dream, I still felt like the loneliest of the lonely. The biggest battle was with myself, a fight I kept losing, but just having our members by my side filled that emptiness and gave me strength.
Even language was a hurdle, especially for rap.
I naturally speak in a North Korean dialect, but when I rap, I train myself to turn it off. As for English, I started with the ABCs and kept practicing until it finally started to feel natural.
Other members, Asian Americans Kenny and Nathan, and Japanese Aito also faced their own challenges.
Hardest part about training was the barrier of cultural barrier, right? So there's a lot of getting used to that, and also sentence structure. So I had to learn how to shape my mind into a Korean person.
Well, I've never been away from family for the past 23 years of my life. There's a lot of adjustment to do. However, with the guys now and the staff and everyone, they're like my second families.
Despite their different backgrounds, they found common ground in pursuing their dreams through music.
With diversity being a factor in our group, we learned that, hey, everyone's story is important. Everyone matters, and everyone deserves to be heard and deserves to be respected, despite wherever they come from.
They hope to be of comfort to others, and that very hope is what's guiding them toward their own dreams.
I had a time when I didn't even look up at the sky. Those hard times live in my lyrics now. To anyone watching us, even from the north, I want to say, dream.
5 different dreams in one universe. Universe is showing that K-pop no longer solely belongs to South Korea, but to those with dreams and passion, regardless of where they're from. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
It's Friday, which means it's a time for arts and culture. We turn to our culture correspondent, Choi Soo-hyung, here in the studio. Good evening, Soo-hyung.
Thank you for having me here, Dami.
So what do you have for us tonight?
Dami, as you know, about a week ago, the ancient rock carvings known as petroglyphs in Ulsan city in the southern part of the country were successfully inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. So I dug in to discover what their true meaning and value are. Let's take a look. Petroglyphs along the Pangucheon stream in Ulsan became South Korea's 70th entry on the UNESCO World Heritage List. These are carvings made on rock walls beside the stream by prehistoric people who lived on the Korean peninsula about 6,000 years ago. This is South Korea's first UNESCO World Heritage listing on petroglyphs that show prehistoric life and possible beliefs.
This inscription is especially meaningful as it marks the first petroglyph site in all of Asia to be recognized by UNESCO. Until now, only 7 countries, including Russia, Algeria, and Brazil, had petroglyphs on the World Heritage List. South Korea is the first in East Asia to achieve this.
On July 12th in Paris, the World Heritage Committee recognized the Pangucheon petroglyphs as masterpieces of human creativity, showcasing the artistic and unique skills of ancient people living along coastal areas of the Korean peninsula. Especially, the committee said those featuring whales and whaling were a historically important record of outstanding universal value.
Whale inscriptions are extremely rare worldwide. These petroglyphs uniquely show not only different whale species, but also detailed hunting methods. With little written record from prehistoric times, the Pangucheon petroglyphs provide invaluable insight into the lives and creativity of early humans.
Following its addition to the UNESCO tentative list in 2010, the full listing has finally come to fruition after 15 years. Notably, it is the second prehistoric heritage site in Korea to gain World Heritage status after the dolmen in Ganghwa in the country's western region. Due to its location near a stream and risk of flooding, the World Heritage Committee recommended reporting progress on flood prevention measures and formally involving local communities in site management. The Korea Heritage Service also made special efforts to ensure their preservation, contributing to the successful listing.
To be listed as a World Heritage Site, its value must be clearly identified and well preserved through strong management plans. All efforts need to meet UNESCO standards. We prepared thoroughly in these areas, which led to its successful listing.
South Korea has 13 sites on the UNESCO tentative list, including the second phase of tidal flats, Seoul's old city walls, and Busan's wartime heritage are under review.
Excellent. But Soo-hyung, I do have to say, enlisting a site to the UNESCO list doesn't happen overnight, right? Tell us about the efforts made to have the Pangucheon petroglyph site added to the UNESCO World Heritage List.
Yes, Professor Yi also mentioned that the government support was important, but also local community has a main key role, played a main key role. Yeah, due to flood and sunlight damage risk, it took decades after the 1970s discovery to reach the tentative list in 2010. There were many efforts to reduce the risk of damage, including building a dam, setting up research centers, along with private-public cooperation.
The local community played a major role in inscribing the Pangucheon petroglyphs. There was much debate over building a dam and how to preserve the site. In the end, citizen groups, local government, and community members worked together to achieve the World Heritage listing.
As the World Heritage Committee also commented, inscription is not the end. It is a shared responsibility to continue preserving the site of universal value.
I'm sure there is more than just Pangucheon petroglyph sites that deserve to be listed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. What other sites is South Korea preparing to, add more in the near future?
Yes, currently we have 13 sites left on the tentative list. The Korea Heritage Service aims to inscribe the second phase of South Korea's idol flats, expanding the already listed UNESCO World Heritage Site covering Seocheon, Gochang, Sinan, Posong, and Suncheon in the west coast of the country. By adding the tidal flats of Seosan, Buan, Gohung, and Yeosu, the KHS said submitting them to the list will better cover the habitats and migratory routes of waterbirds. In addition, Seoul's old city walls that once encircled Hanyang, an old name for the capital predating Seoul, and Busan's wartime heritage from the Korean War are under review.
Absolutely beautiful sites that deserve to be on the list. And Soo-hyung, one more good news. I heard South Korea will be hosting the next year's World Heritage Sites Committee. Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right, Dami. On July 15, during this year's Heritage Committee session in Paris, South Korea was selected as the next host country. While other Asian countries have hosted the committee in the past, this will be South Korea's first time since Japan last hosted in 1998. As a result, Korea will serve as the chair of the 48th World Heritage Committee in July next year, with the host city being Busan. Officials in Busan said the city was chosen for its proven ability to host large-scale events with strong infrastructure, security, and accommodation. Busan Metropolitan Government has announced plans to showcase the value of World Heritage through unique programs only Busan can offer.
Absolutely. I'm sure you'll be down there in Busan next year around this time of the year to cover the report. Thank you for coming in tonight.
My pleasure.
Torrential rain has been pouring down for 3 straight days. As much as 300 millimeters of rain is expected in Jeollanam-do province, in Gyeongsang-namdo province, up to 200 millimeters in the Chungcheong-do provinces and southern Gyeonggi-do province, and 30 to 100 millimeters in Seoul by tomorrow. In addition, there will be strong winds across the country. Gusty winds of around 20 meters per second in the mountainous areas are expected. Also, landslide warnings have been issued in the Chungcheong-do, Jeollado, and Gyeongsang-mukdo provinces. You should avoid riversides and underground roads. Morning temperatures will start off at around 23 to 26 degrees across the country. Daily highs will move up to 29 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon, and Busan. Gyeongju, Daejeon, and Gwangju, 30 degrees. Rain in the Seoul metropolitan area and western parts of Gangwon-do province will mostly stop by Sunday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
저희가 매일매일 자동차를 타고 일상생활에서도 쉽게 사용을 하는데 그런 자동차에서 타이어는 계속해서 버려지고 있거든요. 전 세계적으로 10억 개 이상 버려지고 있는데 특히 소각 처리될 경우에는 대기오염 물질들이 여러 가지가 나오게 되고 매립됐을 때는 지하수나 토양오염 물질들이 많이 방출되게 됩니다. 저희는 그런 타이어들을 어떻게 잘 처리할지 좀 고민을 했었습니다. 타이어가 가지고 있는 접지력이나 내마모성이 좀 우수하다고 생각을 했고요. 저희는 타이어 하나로 신발을 3.5켤레 정도를 만들 수가 있어요. 그렇게 됐을 때 저희의 신발 한 켤레는 타이어에서 발생되는 탄소를 8.9kg 정도 저감할 수 있는 그런 효과가 있습니다. 이 일을 시작하기 전에는 타이어가 그렇게 많이 버려지는지도 몰랐고 그리고 버려진 타이어들이 환경 파괴적으로 처분되는 것도 사실은 잘은 몰랐어요. 점점 더 적체가 되고 있거든요, 타이어들이. 시간이 지나면 지날수록 더 큰 문제가 될 것 같다는 생각에 지금 일을 하고 있습니다. 타이어마다 모양이나 패턴이 굉장히 많이 다양한데 내가 가지고 있는 신발이 다른 신발들과 모양이 다를 수 있다는 점, 그런 점도 재미 요소로 좀 다가가고 있습니다. 저희도 그런 계기를 보다 많은 분들께 하나 더 제공해 주고자 매일매일 신는 신발을 만들겠다고 한 것도 있어요. 조금 더 주변을 살펴보면은 나 스스로도 조금 더 환경 보호에 참여할 수 있는 일이나 물건들이 더 있지 않을까, 그렇게 찾아보시면 어떨까 싶습니다. 나는 다시 달릴 수 있게 만드는 그리너입니다.
Your gateway
Gateway to Korea, Simply K-pop.
Hello everyone, I'm your Simply MC Taewi of AB6. 반갑습니다.
And hello global fans, I'm your Simply Special MC, Alan of Gravity. Great to see you all.
Then this week's Simply K-pop,
Gateway to Korea.
Don't miss out.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gan. Now, with the August 1st tariff deadline looming, tensions are escalating between the U.S. and South Korea. Now, earlier this month, President Trump announced a 25% reciprocal tariff targeting Korean imports, a move that has reignited trade concerns across Asia. While negotiations are underway, the pressure is mounting on both sides to deliver results within just 2 weeks. And at the heart of this standoff are long-standing issues: non-tariff barriers, digital regulations, and strategic investments. To help us unpack what's at stake and where things may be headed, we're joined by Tammy Overby, a seasoned expert on U.S. Korea trade relations. She's the former head of Asia at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the former president of AmCham Korea, and currently a partner at DGA Government Relations in Washington. A big welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So let's start right away with the latest developments, of course. So on July 8th, President Trump released a letter stating that the U.S. would impose 25% reciprocal tariff on South Korea starting August 1st. Now, notably, the letter was addressed only to Korea and Japan. From your perspective, how do you read into this move, and what do you make of the decision to single out these two countries?
Well, it was quite interesting that Korea and Japan were the first countries to receive these letters. So far, it looks like over 20 countries have gotten letters. But I think Korea and Japan probably received the letters first because both countries are very close security and trade allies. And I think President Trump has high expectations that we will be able to do a deal with both countries. And I think he also understands that South Korea literally just got a functioning government. As you know well, Lee Jae-myung elected June 3rd, no transition, took over the reins June 4th after months of having a caretaker government. And Japan also has a very important upper house election July 20th. So I think by giving Korea and Japan these extra three weeks of negotiating time, President Trump is hoping to secure a good deal that's a win-win for all countries.
Right. Then speaking of the new government here in South Korea, last week Korea's chief trade negotiator Yo Han-gu actually visited Washington for high-stakes talks. How would you assess the current administration's handling of this trade negotiations so far?
Well, I think considering the position that Korea started out in and that they were late to the game, they're doing incredibly well. Lee Jae-myung chose Yo Han-gu as trade minister, and before he became trade minister, he spent 2.5 years in Washington at the Peterson Institute. And during that time, Mr. Yo worked very closely with members of Congress, with the administration, with think tanks, with consulting firms, with companies. So he knows Washington well. He also has a lot of friends here. And I would point out that he's only been trade minister, I think, since June 10th, but he's been to Washington several times, I think 3 trips so far. So he's well known and highly respected by his American interlocutors.
Right, so it's not really a new phase in terms of diplomacy. So it's really interesting to see how Korea's approach is being received in Washington. We'll have to see moving forward, though. But President Trump has made it clear that if no deal is reached, the tariffs will take effect on August 1st. And that said, this would be the 3rd deadline. And some speculate there could be another extension. What's your thought on this? How real is the risk that tariffs will actually be imposed this time around?
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone can predict with any degree of certainty what President Trump will do. But I think Korea is in a relatively good place compared to many of the other countries because Korea possesses technologies that President Trump has expressed keen interest in, particularly shipbuilding and semiconductors. And in addition, Korean companies have already been doing what President Trump wants companies to do by making major investments in the United States to build their products here. But, you know, it takes time from when you make the investment to when, for example, in Hyundai's case, for when the first car runs off the new assembly line. But during 2023 and 2024, South Korean companies were the largest foreign investors in the United States. I would also point out that Korean firms are already buying more American products. I think it was in March this year when Chairman Cho Won-tae of Korean Air announced a $32.7 billion deal to buy Boeing planes with GE engines. So I think Korea is in a good position. They're doing the things President Trump wants them to do.
Right, so there are some areas of cooperation that could help the negotiations moving forward. But looking at your past remarks, you've also expressed optimism that a U.S. Korea trade agreement is still achievable. Ms. Overby, what gives you that confidence at this stage? And from a strategic standpoint, what do you see as Korea's strongest card in negotiations right now?
Well, first of all, I think we have to remember that the U.S. only has 3 free trade agreements in Asia. We have one with Singapore, we have one with Australia, and we have one with the Republic of Korea. So my optimism comes from the fact that the U.S.-South Korea economic relationship is already significant and very important to both countries. And so while I think not all countries are going to get a deal, I'm fairly confident that South Korea and the United States will find common ground and will be able to land this deal. From my perspective, Korea's strongest card to play is that Korean companies are already doing what President Trump wants. They're already making major investments in the United States, and they're already showing a willingness to transfer technologies. Both Hanwha Oceans, Hyundai Heavy on shipbuilding have expressed keen interest in the United States. And we already see Korean companies making massive purchases of U.S. goods and services. So I think Korea is in a better position than most countries.
So that optimism is quite refreshing. And your take on Korea's strong cards gives us some clear picture of the options that we could take. Now, let's go to one of the core demands. So the U.S. is continuing to push for the removal of non-tariff barriers, especially in agriculture. And issues like beef and rice imports remain politically quite sensitive in Korea. Now, given that, what kind of compromise do you think could realistically, satisfy both sides?
Well, first, I think we have to acknowledge that because we have a comprehensive, high standard free trade agreement, our tariffs are almost already zero. So the Korean market is already wide open to U.S. products. Korea is also already a major importer of American beef. And there is a small percentage of beef that is older than 30 months that is not yet imported to Korea. But I think some American negotiators view that as leftover work from the chorus negotiations years ago. So I do think there is an expectation that we will be able to resolve that. But, on the issue of rice, every country has a sensitive agriculture product like rice. In the U.S., that product is sugar. So I think it's understandable to recognize that an issue like South Korean rice, that's going to be a very politically difficult issue. And in reality, are Koreans ever going to buy a lot of American rice? I don't think so. I also don't think it's that big of a market for U.S. rice producers. I think the non-tariff barriers in other sectors would be more economically attractive to the U.S. negotiators. I'm not saying ag is not going to be on the table. It will be. They will want a comprehensive package, but I think they're also going to be looking at other things.
Right. So we should really take into consideration that there are some sensitive factors in terms of imports and exports. Now, let's turn to digital trade concerns as well. So Washington has also asked Seoul to ease restrictions on exporting high-resolution maps, to scale back regulations on American tech platforms. And these are closely tied to Korea's domestic regulatory sovereignty. Mr. Overby, how does the Trump administration likely view these issues? And do you think there's some room for adjustment?
Well, you ask a very important question, and I think we just saw how President Trump views tech issues with the way he handled Canada when Canada was threatening to put on their digital services tax. And President Trump threatened 50% tariffs. In the end, Canada backed down. We also just, I think today, saw the EU back down from applying their digital taxes on American tech companies. So I think President Trump has been quite clear that he watches how countries treat American technology companies very closely. And regarding the maps issue, I would note that countries like Israel and Taiwan both face similar security concerns, and yet they've been able to find solutions that were acceptable for both countries. So I'm hopeful that South Korea and the U.S. will also be able to resolve that issue. And the reality is, on the internet today, that mapping data is available. So it is quite frustrating for Americans to go to Korea and not be able to use Apple Maps or Google Maps. And yet in almost every other market they can. So I do hope that we'll find a mutually acceptable solution for that problem.
Right. Let's look forward to some compromises on that area. Now, let's also touch upon investment. You've slightly mentioned about Hyundai Motor Group. Their $21 billion investment pledge in the U.S. has been seen as quite a positive signal to the Trump administration. In your view, how much weight do such kind of large-scale investments carry in, influencing these trade talks?
Yeah, I think they're significant. And again, I would point out particularly for the Trump administration, that the Korean industries has been doing that for the last few years. Hyundai, Kia, SK Hynix, Samsung Electronics, LG batteries, SK On. So we've seen massive investment over the last few years. And I would suggest that these investments in America are helping to supporting the American manufacturing renaissance, which frankly, Korea is really a strong manufacturing country. And bringing that technology here is very helpful. And it's something that President Trump wants. We certainly saw that in when President Yoon called President Trump in November, right after President Trump was reelected. President Trump raised the issue of shipbuilding. Korea is one of the top shipbuilders in the world. And the U.S. is very weak in shipbuilding. So yet another sector where we can collaborate together and strengthen both economies.
Right. So just to clarify, these kinds of large-scale investments towards the U.S. would, do you think it would really help President Trump kind of, adjust this negotiations on trade?
I do. I think that when he's thinking about who to do deals with and what kind of deal, that Korea should get credit for. President Trump, one of the main things he wants is make things in America. You won't get a tariff if you make it in America. Well, I would suggest that most of the major Korean companies are already in the process of doing that. But I would remind President Trump that it takes time from when you make that announcement to getting getting everything set up to be able to manufacture the plant and the facilities. And, it can take several years before the first new Hyundai car will roll off that line. So it does. I would encourage him to be a little more patient in the results of that. So I do think that those investments are very important in how he will judge what kind of a deal to give a partner.
That sounds like a good relief for many of our firms. Now, so with just around 2 weeks to go before the deadline, August 1st, Ms. Overby, what direction should the Korean government take to steer talks towards a resolution? You've stressed that Seoul must demonstrate the so-called genuine intent. But in concrete terms, what does that actually look like from Washington's point?
Well, I think the clearest signal that Seoul could send would be resolving some of these long-standing non-tariff barriers. You mentioned beef, but there are we have them on the digital side where, online Platform Act, where American companies, maybe it is not the intent of the Korean regulators, the KFTC, to target American companies, but the impact is they are being discriminated against. It doesn't, the bills, as I've seen them, don't capture the Chinese firms like AliExpress, Temu, or Xi'an, or TikTok. And yet all the American platforms are captured in that. So I think Korea could send some very clear signals by resolving some of these non-tariff barriers, send a strong message that, Korea also wants to take advantage of the opportunity to make the Korean market more competitive. These things will also, I believe, be good for the Korean market.
Right, so taking proactive actions regarding non-tariff barriers would show some, definitely show some intent to the Trump administration. Now, finally, before we conclude our discussion, beyond this immediate talks, what kind of structural concerns do you believe are really necessary to build a long-term, mutually beneficial U.S.-Korea economic partnership?
Well, I think both sides are off to a very good start, but I think the continued goodwill from South Korea of showing a willingness to resolve these longstanding issues. But also, I would say I've heard from several of our other trade partners a suggestion that from the U.S. side, could be more predictable and a more predictable and consistent trade partner, and that we should honor our agreements. And I say this because we are an FTA partner, the U.S. actually, by applying these new tariffs to Korea, we're in violation of that. So I think one immediate thing the U.S. could do is we could honor our agreements. I would also, the other point I wanted to leave you with is that right now it seems to me that the U.S. is treating all of our trade partners the same. And, you know, whether they're an FTA partner or a mutual defense treaty, security ally, you know, a good friend to the United States, or whether they're an adversary, we're treating everyone the same. And I really think that countries like South Korea that are an FTA partner, a strong security ally, have shown already a deep sense of commitment to the U.S. market by investing heavily in the U.S., a willingness to bring the technology that the U.S. is requesting on shipbuilding, you know, a willingness to consider investing in the Alaska pipeline. I think countries like that, like South Korea, should be treated better than other countries. And as to currently, we don't see that happening.
So let's hope that consensus would also be shared from the White House as well. Thank you for giving us a clear picture of the long-term lens between the two countries. But we'll have to leave our discussion here for tonight while we still continue to track how both sides navigate this high-stakes phase. Many thanks to Ms. Overby for your time and for your insights at this critical juncture.
감사합니다.
감사합니다. And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.